Hello, thanks for joining us again on Power Wheel, TCN's public enlightenment program on Nigeria's electricity sector and efforts at improving power supply in the country. I am Sheung Olagunju. There is no gainsaying that Nigeria's electricity supply sector has been under scrutiny and indeed attacks from the public due to the inadequacy of supply relative to the demand by the public. Since the days of ECN, NEPA up to PACN, and now the privatized GENCOs and DISCOs, as well as TCN, the sector seems to have witnessed minimal improvement despite the huge amount of funds injected into it. The complaints, attacks, and innuendos seem endless, but maybe justifiably so, as the frustrations of Nigerians continue to grow from epileptic power supply due to the importance of electricity to virtually all aspects of life, including the economy, health, education, and so on. Many believe that Nigeria, which needs about 150,000 megawatts of electricity in relation to her population, if we are to go by world standards, or at least 13,000 estimated demand, only manages to generate between 4,000 and 5,000 megawatts in spite of the money sunk into the sector and even the eventual privatization. Power Wheel sought the views of the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, SAN, who many Nigerians saw as a messiah when appointed to man the sector on this all-important but challenging power sector. Thank you for joining us on Power Wheel, Honorable Minister. So, on assumption of office, you instituted a monthly power sector operators meeting. What was the need for this?
The meeting had many objectives. I wanted to see as many of the power assets, the substations, the generating plants, and the distribution services as well. And at that time, it was just unthinkable that I could go on a national tour and see all of that without being in the office. So it was a way in which I got gradually every month to visit one GENCO, one DISCO, or a combination of a GENCO and a DISCO to see the power plants, to see the substations where we host the meeting. So I insisted that the meeting must be held at a power facility by any of the private owners who volunteered to host it. So it was a voluntary thing. Secondly, it enabled us, the other objective, so the first objective for me to see. The second objective was to bring everybody together once a month, solve problems that were dragging either through bureaucracy. People wrote letters, they haven't gotten a reply, and I thought if we brought everybody under one roof, we could solve problems once a month. And also we could share experiences. DISCOs, GENCOs could do some peer review, see how other people are running their own assets by going to a meeting and seeing what they're doing in their facilities. The third thing also was to create a one-stop center for information dissemination to the public. And so through our monthly communiques, with everybody from the gas providers to the TCN, market operator, system operator, to MBET, to GENCO, DISCO, ministry, NEMSA, NEC, everybody was there. We could issue a clear statement that members of the public can rely on instead of some of the misleading statements that went out to the public.
So what have these monthly meetings been able to achieve?
Essentially, they've achieved all of the objectives, and one of the first things I do at every meeting is to ask the participants if the meeting was still serving its purpose, and that they should do so by a show of hands. And anytime I told them that they felt the meeting was no longer useful, we would stop it. So at least they still voted for it last month.
So what do you think has been the major impact of the privatization of the GENCOs and DISCOs?
Well, there have been many impacts, but first we must understand that the privatization itself is in transition. It's in an evolution stage. It's 3.5 years on, and there's a lot to learn. You have people who are acting as pioneers in an industry in which private sector has never really taken a foothold after over 60 years of government control. But I can tell you immediately, for the first time, people can pay for their energy charge up electronically. That wasn't there before privatization, if I recall. For the first time, people are getting smart meters, prepaid meters, which wasn't there before privatization. It's not enough. There's still many more people to serve, but those are some of the things you will see. You will also see that on the generation side, you will see improved investments in turbines, in repairs, in maintenance, and so on and so forth. And so it's coming on, but there's still challenges, without a doubt.
There have been speculations about an imminent privatization of TCN. What is the federal government's position on this?
Again, as you say, it's speculation, so I ordinarily don't like to respond to what people are guessing. People are guessing all sorts of things in their private places, but I like to deal with the facts. So, but I've been asked this question before. And perhaps you will know. I mean, you worked in TCN when we had private capacity in there in the terms of Manitoba, and the question to ask is, did we get what we wanted? And I know what I inherited in terms of relationship between the local and the foreign staff of Manitoba, and I know what the reports by the TCN group in terms of service level agreement performance by the private service we had. So that is experience enough to ask you to rethink. The second reason, of course, is that we've privatized generation, we've privatized distribution, and they are still in transition. We haven't gotten the results that I know we will get. I know we will get those results, but we haven't gotten all of the results yet. So I think we must be a little slow then to, as it were, privatize everything if that was government's decision. I personally wouldn't recommend privatization of TCN or the transmission system. But if government took that decision, which I could not be able to stop, my position would be that, well, you must do it more slowly. But I will come back to it because also, as I say, if you want to renovate an already built house, which is the analogy we can draw with the transmission system that TCN inherited, I don't think that you are going to shut down the kitchen, the bathroom, the sitting room, and the bedrooms at once. You are going to do them in phases, unless you are ready to move out of that house, which means that you have an alternative place to stay. So do we have an alternative transmission system? Certainly not. And therefore, if we have privatized the distribution system and the generation system, we must allow them to gain stability first before tinkering again with the system.
So the renewable energy is one of the energy sources you've often advocated in achieving incremental power for the nation. How achievable is this, and how soon?
Well, renewables 10, 15 years ago, as I remarked yesterday, is that they used to be on these margins of the power conversation because they were expensive, they were evolving. Solar particularly was not very, very reliable, but they have moved from the margins to the mainstream. The price has come down, the technology of solar has improved, and it's improving by the day. Other methods are evolving, wind, wave energy, and so many things are coming on stream. And the awareness of the impact of climate change also compels many more countries and societies to begin to look at renewables. And so we are in good company and we are acting eminently sensibly by promoting renewables. And at the launch of the board of the Renewable Rural Electrification Agency yesterday, I made the point very clearly, consistent with government's policy, that they will be the champion of renewables because they are the easiest ways actually to reach many of the people who have not been connected yet. So it's very important, and they will form a critical part of our roadmap implementation of achieving incremental energy, getting people who have not yet been connected to be connected, while we improve on the service levels to those who are already connected but who are having outages.
Are there other sources of energy Nigeria could utilize now to get more power?
Yes, interesting you make the point, because some countries are limited to only one source of energy or two. Some countries are limited to only hydro and probably wind, or only wind and probably coal. Or Nigeria has the capacity to generate energy from coal, from the sun, from gas, from water, hydro, some wind, and even from the energy of the Atlantic Ocean, which is causing a coastal challenge, and also, interestingly, from nuclear power, all of which are in various stages of development. So we've done a lot of gas, we've seen the vulnerability, we've done hydros, we need to improve and do more. So we're doing Zungeru, we're trying to get Mambila on, we're trying to finish Gurara, Dadinkowa, which are all hydro plants. We've done solar at Lower Usman Dam, and we've also issued PPAs to about 14 solar developers, and we're trying to start something again in Jigawa. So we're looking at all of the options. And interesting, if I may make the point, we're also looking at coal. We're talking to 2 coal developers so that we achieve the whole energy mix that allows us to switch from one to the other without being vulnerable again, as we have been with destruction to the gas pipelines.
Now, talking about money issues, NBET and the market operator are key players in the Nigerian electricity supply industry, NESI. But there seems to be areas of overlap in their functions. Does any conflict arise, and how are they?
I don't think so. I think that you must understand that the role of the market operator is much more pervasive in terms of those are the ones that monitor what everybody collects, what everybody pays, what everybody is entitled to. They are like the umpire for financial matters. That's my understanding of the way the privatization was structured. NBET, on the contrary, is the bulk trader for power, because the discos ideally should be buying their power from the gencos. But because it was a transition arrangement, government said, okay, we will create a bulk trader. They will guarantee the purchase of all the energy that you produce and guarantee that you will be paid. That's why NBET is now the one issuing a payment assurance program for 701 billion, because some people have not been paid. NBET now has the obligation to collect the power it has vested in the discos from the discos. But there are 2 different contracts. A contract with the power producers and a contract with the power distributors. So their roles don't collide in that sense. But to the extent that they deal with payment assurance, financial viability, liquidity sustainability, they may appear, but there are no crossing of lines.
So we go to the issue of gas, which is one that operators, especially gencos, complain about recurringly. What's the problem and what's being done to solve it?
Well, first of all, we have large reserves of gas, but we are not producing enough gas for our local demand. Yes, there are many gas fields that people are holding licenses to that they are not operating. so that there's not enough gas. Now, when the gas that is not enough is even now produced, we now have sabotage, damage to gas pipelines. I have said this before and I stand to be corrected. There has been damage to pipelines in the past, but I don't recall that there has been damage, deliberate damage to gas pipelines. The pipelines that used to be damaged were product pipelines, where you could get some diesel, some petrol, some kerosene. There was an immediate pecuniary benefit. But there is no way that I know that you could harness a gas pipeline because you just dissipate the gas into the air. So this was clear sabotage, and we have managed to engage with those who claim to be aggrieved, and we see some calming of the nerves. So what is going on now is repairs to the damage in order to improve the gas supply. But beyond that is the implementation of the gas development policy launched by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources and approved by Mr. President, that allows access, strategic partnerships, and opening up of the unutilized gas production license. We need to see more of that. There are a couple of new Nigerian companies venturing into that field now, and we are encouraging them. In fact, in the next few days, I'm having a meeting with the leadership of the Nigerian Gas Association, just to hear from them what we as government can do to enable their members begin to operate and develop and produce those gas wells. So most of the gas that we currently get is gas that comes from the production of crude oil. That's why it's called associated gas. But that gas is nowhere near the capacity of pure gas fields that we haven't fully produced and optimized. And that's what we want to unlock.
You're watching Power Wheel, and we've been engaging the Honorable Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, on the myriad of challenges in the sector and how he's confronting them to achieve stable power supply in the country. The program, and indeed the interview, continue shortly. Challenges facing the power sector is funding. What's government doing to provide funds, either loans or grants, as requested by operators across the value chain?
Well, as you might have read, there is a Electricity Management Stabilization Fund by the CBN, NEMSF fund, that was supposed to help the discos and in particular and other operators in the sector to get access to capital at low interest costs. Of course, it's interesting that you take the point. Part of the condition also, there was that you must create an escrow account from which we can see what you are doing with the money that we give to you. And some of the discos didn't like this idea, so they went to court to say that no. And I don't see who wants to borrow money and then tell the bank that is lending you money that you don't. They have no right to see where you are putting the money. And this is one of the things where they form themselves into an association saying that, oh, CBN wants to be controlling their accounts. And, but that's part of the support that has come to them. I know also that the French Development Agency has provided some financing support through a local bank for own lending. I think it's about 10 or 11% for 15 years, I think. So all of those facilities are there. But of course, because of the way the acquisition was structured, the financing of the acquiring companies was structured when they started this privatization, some of them just don't have the room on their balance sheets to take up these loans. But we're helping to deal with this as we go on. The other support that has come into the system in terms of financing to support liquidity is the 701 billion payment assurance guarantee by government on behalf of MBED. And let me be clear, we are not giving anybody 701 billion naira. We have just done a calculation of how much the total energy that will be produced over the next 2 years will be. And we have looked at the price, we have looked at how much MBED is able to collect at this moment, and we have given MBED a target to increase collection. And we have capped the total amount that will be payable to keep power steady at 701 billion.
Honourable Minister, the TCN has consistently been a scapegoat in the sector, probably because it's still the only one left with government. It has even been called the weakest link by some and blamed for virtually all the problems in the sector. Since coming on board, sir, how would you rate TCN's operations and efforts at improving the grid?
We are trying to get TCN to be more responsive, especially to its customers who are the DISCOs and the GENCOs, because TCN is the link between them. We want to see improved response time. We want to see well-managed substations. We want to see efficient inventory and stock keeping so that parts are made available in advance, not in arrears. And we want to hold people to performance levels such that if TCN causes any loss to the system, somebody must pay for that loss, either in terms of money or in terms of his job. So, and we want to incentivize people also to be able to do the job that they are employed to do. So those are the mandates of the new interim TCN MD, and we're giving support from ministerial level. TCN's grid capacity is much misunderstood, and we continuously try to correct it. I know that TCN is now at over 6,200 megawatt carrying capacity from when I assumed office, which was just about 5,000 megawatt. So the idea of this interview, to the extent that it shares that expansion of the grid, is welcome and is good, because what has sunk in people's mind is TCN has only 5,000 capacity. And I've continuously explained to them that the grid is a dynamic thing. It must grow as the energy production capacity grows. But it must not grow inordinately ahead or inordinately behind. If it goes inordinately behind, you lose money in terms of power produced that cannot be transported. If it goes inordinately ahead, you lose money by building capacity that is not used. So you need to find a fine balance. And to the extent that our highest generation on record today as a nation is just a little over 5,000. If we have a 6,200 capacity today, TCN is not doing badly, but it can improve because our installed capacity is actually 12,000 plus, and we want to deploy all of that capacity. So we must synchronize the development with TCN's carrying capacity.
Finally, sir, the Nigerian electricity sector seems jinxed, let me use that word. Some say money just keeps sinking in with no commensurate results. Is that the reality?
I think those are generalizations. I've had all of these generalizations, and I think that we must be a little more analytical in our mind. How much do we really expect power to cost? And so when we are talking of money, that seems to be a lot. Is it actually a lot of money, or is it even enough money? I was in a meeting where we were recommending that government should provide 80 billion naira for its 2017 power consumption. And it took some time to persuade people that 80 billion naira for the cost of the energy that we consume is not such a lot of money for the federal government of Nigeria, with all of its formations across the country, with its police, military, naval, all those barracks, with its government schools and all of that. And that, it sounded like a lot of money. But when, and so I say this by way of example, that when we now began to say, how much were we spending on generators? How much were we spending on diesel? it became clear that that was a lot more than 80 billion naira. Because the cost of self-generation today is over 60 naira per kilowatt hour if you use diesel. And the public tariff is hovering between 25 and 29 naira. So the idea, therefore, that a lot of money has been sunk into it is probably misconceived. And if it was true, then why are we asking private sector to come and spend more money? If really that was true. Why did private sector inherit old transformers, old conductors, old RMUs, old poles? So clearly we haven't invested enough. So I disagree with those conclusions that money has been sunk. And then we must contextualize what we have bought. We developed 10 new power plants. Alaoji, Calabar, Olorunsogo, Omotosho, Geregu 1, Geregu 2, and all of those things. So we must understand what we have bought. Can we buy them again today? At the time we bought. Yes, there are challenges with them. When we were doing the planning, the government of the day then, they probably didn't plan the evacuation correctly or plan the gas supply properly. But those assets are there. It is our responsibility to optimize that existing capacity. So I never support those generalizations. I say we spent all the money, we don't have nothing to show for it. Those are generalizations that trivialize the reality. There is an asset that has been acquired. It is not delivering its optimal capacity. It is contributing something. It is our responsibility now to make it more efficient.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you.
We really do appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for coming on Power Wheel.
Thank you.
That's our package on Power Wheel today. Hope you found it educative and informative. That's our goal. Also, reach us with your feedback through questions or comments. And remember that TCN is not currently recruiting. Do not pay money to anyone through any agent or website for employment into TCN. When it is time for recruitment, it is based solely on merit and qualification. Be guided. I am Sheung Olagunju. Thanks for watching.